I think I've always been inclined to make things. When I was a child, my mother got me sewing. She taught me to embroider. My grandmother was a great knitter. I think it was a natural part of my childhood. And I was always one of those teenagers making my own clothes. And yeah, I was just drawn to it. And I come from a family of hoarders, so there were always boxes and drawers full of old bits of lace, and yes, I was always drawn to textiles. I actually didn't go to art college till I was in my 30s. I studied an academic degree in art history first when I first left school, but was always making, and discovered weaving at an evening class, and just fell in love with it and decided to go to art college and do it properly. So I think, it was just, I don't know, I suppose I feel like it's kind of in my nature, but also in my background, in my family background. That's why I started being a maker. And then having young children meant that working for myself was an easier way of combining, work and family life. So I suppose there are practical reasons. And after leaving art college, there was obviously an option of going to work in industry, in textiles in some way. And I sort of decided quite early on that wasn't the path I wanted to take. I wanted to work for myself.
Okay. The craft is often considered an immersive activity. How does this apply to your own practice, and what is the balance and approach between cognitive thinking and haptic or fine motor skills?
Quite a lot of my woven work starts with research into an idea, and which is then developed by doing and making, and is often turned into something else just by experimenting with materials. To give me more element to the question, I've lost track.
Well, you've already discussed that your work is informed through training, prior education and training, but is there an intuitive or experimental element to your work, or an element of risk-taking, or is it reactive? Does it respond does it require an immediate response to the material and process?
I think there's a bit of both. I think I am drawn to certain materials and I kind of enjoy having a sort of limitation that the materials will impose, and have to work, sort of invent ways of dealing with those limitations. But quite often when I'm working, I will, especially in weaving, because you have to do quite a lot of planning beforehand in setting up a loom. You've made decisions about the yarns and the colours that are going to be in the warp. And so you have a structure that's already set up that you're going to weave into. But even within the confines of that structure, there are thousands of choices you can make at any moment to alter how it will look and feel and the function of it. So quite often I might start thinking I know totally what I'm going to be doing, but then as I start weaving and materials react in surprising ways, or the colour doesn't work the way I thought it was going to work, then I'll adapt and change as I'm going along. So especially if I'm using a new material, which I sometimes make ill-informed guesses about what might work and what won't, and then I adapt. But usually the happy accident is the best, has the best outcome. So I like that. There's an element of surprise, even though weaving is quite mathematical and has grids and lines and right angles. Things can happen within that structure.
And following on from that, to what extent has your prior education, both specialist and state-led, contributed to understanding and ongoing development of your practice? Because you just touched on the mathematical element there.
Well, in terms of the sort of mathematical element, I was led to believe all through school that I was rubbish at maths, and then I discovered that I wasn't really. Although obviously the maths involved in weaving is fairly limited. It's not that sophisticated, but it's problem solving, and I like problem solving, and a lot of making is about problem solving in different levels. But my education that led me to becoming a weaver was quite patchy. I actually didn't even do GCSE or O-level art at school. It was something that I did outside of school, outside of education, and followed quite an academic route. And then as I got older and realised making is what I really love doing, I then went back into education and did a degree in textiles. And it was really through doing evening classes in weaving, which I was attracted to just because I loved fabrics and I was making lots of clothes at the time, and I quite liked the idea of making the actual fabric and then making the clothes, to have control over every aspect of a design of a garment. That's how I started doing it, and I was very lucky to be taught by some brilliant teachers who inspired me and encouraged me to go to art college. So, and I was, very pleased that I met them, and I still know them.
So following on from that, how does your practice continue to evolve? And then are there any additional factors or inherited knowledge that contribute to this? You've mentioned that your mother and your grandmother kind of informed your early stages of your education. Yeah. How does your professional identity continue to develop?
I think when I first left art college and I set up myself in a studio as a weaver, I mistakenly thought the way to go about it was to make items for sale, like scarves and cushions, sort of things that could be sold at craft fairs or in craft shops. And I sort of followed that path for quite a while and got a bit bored, because quite often, you make a scarf and someone likes it, so you have to make another one. And I realised I really don't like making the same thing twice. And I was then, probably about 8, maybe 10 years ago, I was approached to do some teaching. And so my practice has evolved in that I now earn money from teaching, and I make pieces that are more like art pieces that I sell every now and again, but I'm not sort of doing the tour of the craft fairs, which actually doesn't really earn many people much money. So my practice has evolved in that way. So I tend to sell pieces through an exhibition in a gallery rather than, from a stall.
And does that lead from commissioned work as well?
Yes, yeah, and not loads, but every now and again. And so doing the teaching has sort of freed me up to make things I really want to make. And I will quite often, my work, I kind of set myself projects in a way, and I'll work towards a final goal with the hope that it will end up in an exhibition. But a lot of my work over the past few years has been inspired by walking, and the first big walk I did was was along the length of the River Lee. I walked from the source, which is just outside Luton, to where it meets the Thames in Leamouth. And so I did a series of 8 walks. I split up the river into 8 chunks and did a walk a week and kept a blog and took photographs and collected things on the way, and then sort of made a sort of body of work that was all about that journey. And it was that was kind of a start of something that has evolved into the way I work. So I'm currently involved in another project, which is another walking project, which is more local. It's a sort of Hackney-based project. So, yeah, that's...
And how do you see the future of craft, both in its present guise and in response to global political, social, economic and even environmental changes?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a sort of element of nostalgia about craft, and I'm sort of a bit wary of valuing craft just because it's sort of keeping traditions going just for the sake of it is not necessarily a good idea. But I think the way craft connects people with other people and the environment is really important. Through the teaching that I've done, I've sort of met so many different people who've been drawn to weaving, and it's kind of made me think a lot about what I do and why people are motivated to come here for weaving classes. I've had a very large amount of people who are architects over the years coming for weaving classes, and they all say the same thing, because they go and study architecture, and when they're studying architecture they make stuff, they make models and they do things with their hands, and when they become an architect it's all on a screen and they don't have a physical connection with making anymore, and they miss it, and so they want to get their hands on and do something. And and there's also quite a lot of people who've maybe done textiles or fashion at art college, and then they're working for French Connection and they just do everything on a screen, they don't make stuff. So I think there is some sort of fundamental human desire to connect with physical processes, and I think the sort of digital technology alienates people from the world in which they live in. And there's Bob Crow, the British Transport Union leader. When he was talking about trains being made driverless, he said that's all very well, but what do people do? And that's a big question for all of us, about not just craftspeople but anyone in a sort of work environment. If machines take over our jobs, what are we going to do with our time? And and there's a value in people feeling that they are valued and have a purpose. So I think that's an important part of craft. And also it's something that can make the world a more beautiful place. And that's an important quality, I think.